Welcome to the Back on Track podcast with me, Sam West. In every episode, I interview someone who's changed, recovered, or become successful after having faced real adversity in their life. What's more, at the end of every episode, guests give you a few bits of advice which you can use to improve your own life too. On today's episode is co-founder of 1 Year No Beer, Ruari Fairbairns, who set up the company to help people take a break from alcohol and realise the benefits that it can bring to your life. But Ruari's journey to setting up 1 Year No Beer definitely hasn't been an easy one. He suffered with quite bad ADHD as a child and struggled mentally, and this even resulted in a number of suicide attempts by the age of just 13. Ruari was also really motivated to become an entrepreneur from an early age, and by his mid-20s he'd set up a number of companies and also nearly appeared on The Apprentice, but his real success came from when he was working as an oil broker in London. However, this was a job that involved a lot of drinking and entertaining, and after a while this began to take a toll on his relationship with his wife. So, after going 90 days alcohol-free, Ruari couldn't believe the benefits that he was feeling, so much so that he decided to quit his job as an oil broker where he was earning high six figures and start 1 Year No Beer with a former colleague to help other people reassess their relationship with alcohol as well. So, without further ado, let's find out what happened by listening to his story from start to finish. Ruari, first of all, I just want to say a massive thanks for taking the time to come on the podcast. I really appreciate you giving us some of your time this evening. And how are you doing? How's everything going?
Great, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on, Sam. A chance to chat to you, chat to people, and hopefully inspire them a little bit. I will never not take up that option. So really appreciate the time.
No, fantastic. And yeah, what you're doing is very inspiring, and we're going to get into it in a whole lot of detail now. But before we get to 1 Year No Beer, Ruari, I'd like to rewind right back to the start of your story. To the age of 6, actually, because I found something really interesting. I heard you speak in another interview, and I heard you say that you had quite bad ADHD when you were younger, and your parents were effectively given an ultimatum, if you like, that it was going to be medication or therapy or counselling. And you said in your own words that you felt lucky that they chose the counselling route, and I think you said that it made you a wiser man. And I'm just wondering, was therapy or counselling something that continued sort of into your early teenage years, or was it something that only happened sort of, I don't know, from the age of 6 to 8, a short period?
Okay, amazing. And you're right. The noise inside my head from being hyperactive. I mean, hyperactive is what they called it then, later diagnosed with ADHD. They just didn't understand on the Isle of Mull what this behavior was, but they just knew they didn't want it. The my parents were always incredibly supportive. They would say things like, you're special, you're gifted, and things like that. Whereas the outside world was saying, you're bad and naughty and mischievous and things like that, and it caused a lot of divide. And at times I actually chose to act up into the mischievous one. And I think the decision to go into counselling wasn't necessarily about making me wiser, but what it did do is it started the process of me thinking about what was going on in my brain. I've spent a life trying to understand that and trying to read more about it and understand it. And because I've spent a life doing that now, I can help so many other people who have a noisy head. And noisy head is like that very loud, very self-deprecating, self-hatred, self-destruct, anger, all that noise inside your head, just for clarity. So I think that the main part here was then, because I'd had counselling at such a young age. Again, I was in counselling in secondary school, and then I sought my own counselling in my 20s, in living in Edinburgh. Into my 30s, started couples counselling with my wife, and only a year into our marriage, we went into couples counselling, and that was one of the best things we ever did. In fact, we would not be married if we hadn't have gone down that couples counselling route. And then, different couples counsellors, some were absolutely awful, came out worse than we went in. and some were transformative. And then started coaching, and coaching began shifting me in a very different way, and then deepened coaching and went right down the coaching rabbit hole along with meditation. And I would say there is no area of my life I haven't touched. There's no subject matter that I have not discussed with people. I've gone into the deep, dark depths of shame, the stuff that you hide away quietly in the recess of your brain and never talk about to anyone. I've talked about it, and I've sought help. And because of that, I feel that I'm able to um, understand or feel compassionate about anybody. Anybody. What doesn't matter whether you were a serial murderer or a pedophile or whatever it is, I'm able to feel compassion because I understand that the brain does crazy things to people and the environment does, and all of those things.
That's fantastic, that you've done it all. And also I love the fact that you speak so openly about it. And it's actually something that I speak about on this podcast a fair bit, because mental health is also a recurring theme. And I'm just wondering, Ruari, whether, because obviously sadly there is still sort of a stigma that can sometimes exist with counselling mental health and stuff like that. And I'm wondering whether that's ever something that you felt personally, maybe a reaction that somebody had when you said that you were in counselling, or if you've been sort of lucky enough to never experience that stigma.
No. I mean, categorically I had that stigma. I mean, from a young age, what's wrong with you? Why are you in counseling? And feeling like you're a broken person, and then acting out to the broken piece. So there's part of me which made a decision that that's what I was. I was going to be a broken person forever. And the brokenness met its peak, or one of its major peaks, when I tried to take my own life at 13 years old.
Oh my
And I had
goodness.
two suicide attempts in a fairly close proximity, the second of which was a miracle. I survived. So the I mean, genuinely, I feel that counseling supported me, but I don't feel like counseling was an entirely transformative event like coaching was. So that's my opinion of it today. I may be giving, short circuit to counseling, because of course there are many situations where counseling is so key, and trauma and all those kind of things. But yeah, I think the biggest shifts in my life came from coaching.
Well, it's incredibly inspiring, Ruari, that you've come from, that terrible low at the age of 13 to where you are now, and doing such great work to try and inspire other people. And also, I've just got so much respect for you speaking about this openly. We need more people to speak about it openly. So yeah, I've got an unlimited amount of respect for you. Thanks so much for sharing that.
I think exactly on that note, Sam, that is the very essence of changing society, is talking about it. And if you see mental health, like, it's okay to talk about mental health now. And I jokingly said the other day, like, if you want to come in and into a corporate and talk about mental health, you'll have a full auditorium. If you want to come into a corporate and talk about alcohol, it'll be empty.
Yeah, it's because alcohol is the thing that nobody wants to accept can be a problem.
We're not ready for that subject yet, right? We're not ready. I'm not ready to admit alcohol is a problem in my life, or that it's having any bad, no, don't go there. But we'll get on to all of that.
Exactly. Yeah, I can certainly understand that's been a barrier for you. And as you rightly say, we will get into that. But the next part of your story, Ruari, that I found incredibly interesting was that by the age of 25, you'd started up 5 companies. Now, that's a staggering amount. I don't know how many people out there there'll be, that started up 5 companies by that age. And I'm just wondering, where did that drive for entrepreneurship come from? What was driving you to sort of try so hard to become an entrepreneur from such a young age?
So when after the suicide attempts, my parents were sort of sitting me down and trying to get me to see their side, this sort of yin and yang, black and white, on off, right? You're either special or you're, a weirdo. And so they were trying to get me to see this side. And in talking about it, they were like, look, you're gonna see and be and do big things in the world. And they encouraged me to write a letter to somebody who inspired me. So I wrote a letter to Richard Branson. And I said, look, amongst many things, but I'm going to change the world one day, and I'm looking forward to having lunch with you.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize, and I'm not even sure they realized, but something really big was happening in that letter, and it's called hope. And the thing about hope is there was a study published in the Lancet just in September, a huge study about hope, showing that hope not only dramatically increases the likelihood of you recovering from injury, improves your chances of recovering and or dealing with cancer and major diseases and problems, but it's also more likely to have you successful at work and deal with stressful situations. And there's all of these things that hope helps with. And yet, hope only ever exists in adversity, right? You don't get hope unless you have difficult situations and dangerous situations and damage and pain and things like that. That's where hope comes from. So it's a really interesting part, but that's what that letter was for me. That letter was hope. And I guess I clung on to it. So I had that part and I was like, right, I'm going to make this true. And so I left school at 15 and set up my first business, and I ran that for 2 years, selling and servicing computers on the Isle of Mull. I mean, this is a tiny little business with a kid who doesn't really know what he's doing. The most money I made was actually teaching housewives how to use Windows and a mouse, right? Charging by the hour. And Mull's a tiny place, population 2,000, same size as the M25, right? It's tiny. And then I then took a couple of sales careers, and then I thought, wow, I'm brilliant at selling. I'm going to set up a sales agency. So I set up a sort of call center helping tech companies sell their products. And we ran that for 3 years with 10 people. Really, there were 3 businesses with 2 projects that never went live. And but what there was just a series of failures. And it was fail and fail and fail. And I called myself a serial failpreneur, right? And even when people are like, oh, I get invited onto a business podcast, I'm like, look, I'm much better at telling you what not to do than what to do, because I'm still working that bit out.
Yeah, that must have been incredibly difficult for you, and it's kind of a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? When you see yourself as a failure or whatever, you can go in a very negative spiral. But the next thing that I wanted to talk about, Ruari, was sometime after you'd started these 5 companies, you were in the pub with some friends, and they said that you should go on the Apprentice, right? And 5 pints deep, you go home and you fill out the application. Not sure how you did that after a few beers, but it was successful. And you got invited on the show, and I believe right into the final stages, and you travelled there, and right at the last minute, that opportunity was pulled away from you for reasons that they didn't explain in detail at the time, I think I'm right in saying. And I'm just wondering how difficult that was for you mentally, because you'd mentioned that you'd seen what you'd created up to that point as being failures effectively, although most people wouldn't see it that way. They'd find it incredible, I think, what you tried to do. And then you get this opportunity to go on The Apprentice, and you think this could be my big moment, and sort of at the last minute it's taken away. And I'm just wondering how difficult that was for you mentally.
So there are a few things about failure and rejection, I guess. In terms of not getting onto The Apprentice, it was obviously deflating, and they were going to take me back to Mull, and I was like, "There's no way I'm going back there." And instead, I looked at the departure board in the airport and went, "Oh, I'm going to go to Ibiza instead." Went out to Ibiza, bumped into an oil broker, and ended up becoming an oil broker. And so I'm actually incredibly grateful for The Apprentice, and although got upset at not getting on it, there was also this path that's kind of run through my life. And I'm going to ruin this now, but I'm going to give it a shot. So there's this great old story of the Japanese farmer who's out in the farm, and he's working away, and his son is working there with him, and he falls off a cart and breaks his leg. And the village are like, "Oh my gosh, how are you going to get your crops in now with your son? That's so unlucky, so awful." And he's like, "Unlucky, not unlucky, only time will tell." And then they go to war. The country ends up going to war, and the army drafts in, and they come in and they take all the boys in the village apart from his. And the village are like, "Lucky," oh so, and he's like, "Lucky, unlucky." And the story goes on and on and on and on and on. And ultimately, we don't really know, right? We don't really know, but what we hold on to is this thread of destiny. And I guess that's what for me had fed in through, was like that letter, that hope, that peace, that knowing. It's like, okay, so this is another failure, but it's just leading on to the next success. And the other part, which I'm incredibly grateful for, is that one of my first ever jobs. So after I set up my business and then moved to Glasgow and started selling gas and electric door to door. And it's a job where the people last, on average 3 months max. My own brother joined up with me. He lasted 2 months. I was there for 11 months. I got so good at rejection. I knew how to deal with fuck off, right? So the people who were at the door and just like saw a salesperson who were just like, fuck off. It was like, "Meh," or whatever. And I think that set me up for life, that training I had. And I'm incredibly grateful to my mentor, Danny, who coached me through those days and made me very good, because that's the same thing when I went into broking. The rejection in broking is, rabid and emotional, deeply emotional. I used to say to people that, when a client trades away from you, it's like finding out your girlfriend has cheated on you. It's the same feeling. It's like
A bit like finding out you'd been on other podcasts today, Ruari.
yeah.
Yeah.
You feel this what? And that feeling. And to feel that a couple of times a day, I'm not surprised more brokers are drinking because it's a powerful emotion to have to deal with.
But we've already found a lot of sense there in your previous failures, because they made you incredibly resilient. And the other thing that I loved was, being sort of rejected, if you like, from The Apprentice in the moment must have seemed like a terrible thing. But actually, if that had never happened, you never would have gone to Ibiza, you never would have met that guy, never would have become an oil broker, and eventually led on to 1 year no beer. So I think that's really, that will provide some comfort to some people out there,
Well, Steve Jobs says it perfectly, right? He says, you never understand when you're in the moment. It's only looking back that you can connect the dots and see that it all was part of the transition. And as we go through this story, there is so much more to this singular thread that is like, wow, everything has led to this point.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we get on to moving to London and becoming an oil broker, how long did you spend in Ibiza, Ruari? And I mean, we can imagine, myself and the listeners, we can imagine what your lifestyle might have been like over there, from what we know about Ibiza. But could you fill in the blanks for us? Yeah, how long did you spend over there, and what was your lifestyle like?
Well, just to put it into context, Ibiza wasn't strange to me, because when I was 17, I went out there and worked a summer, and did everything you'd imagine and more. And came back a messed up human being. So when I went out there straight after The Apprentice, it was probably 3 days of non-stop partying to begin with, and then I started calling round, and I was like, hey, does anybody have any friends out here, do you know? And some friends of friends were staying in a villa, and so I went to stay at that villa, and that's where I bumped into the legend that is Evo, who got me the job as an oil broker. But I was out there for 2 weeks, I think, in total at that period. So yeah.
Fantastic. So then you move to London and you become an oil broker, but not only just an oil broker, a very good one. You rose through the ranks very quickly. From doing my research, at least it seemed that way. And I'm just curious, Ruari, what do you think made you so good at that job? What qualities? I mean, we touched on resilience as one, but what other things do you think made you so good at what you did?
Yes. Okay. Well, I think it was a crescendo that allowed it. So the first thing was, they were taking on university graduates who would come out of university at 22, having whatever it is, I don't even know what the age is, 21, 22, 23, because I didn't do university, who have never worked before and actually need to understand what it is to work in a company. And that takes some time, a year of people to actually understand how to behave, how it operates, how all these things go on. I've been doing that since I was 15, right? And then not only that, I had been dealing with people. When I ran my own business, I was meeting leaders and CEOs and people like that. I was meeting investors of technology businesses who wanted to get us in to sell. A director at Boots. So I'd already made these connections where speaking to somebody who is of a senior level was like totally normal to me. It wasn't any, whereas the younger brokers coming through haven't got that. They're like, oh, is he so that was a part. And then having done decades of sales training by the time I was 26 when I started there. So I'd literally been selling for 11 years, and all sales. So telesales, field sales, door-to-door sales, my own sales outsourcing agency. Like, I'd cut my bread on sales. And now here I was going into an environment. Oh, and don't forget the partying, right? I was amazing at partying, loved hanging out with people, loved partying with all sorts of, whatever, just make friends with people and go and party. So I was very good at that. Well, that's what broking is. It is sales and partying. And so those two worlds kind of came together, and that's where I excelled at it.
Yeah, it seems like you were the perfect fit for it. It's funny how we sometimes find our place at the right time. But one thing that you mentioned there was the partying, and I think whenever alcohol becomes a part of our working lives and we spend so much time at work, it can be a sort of a slippery slope. And Ruari, I'm curious, how would you before we get to sort of the train incident and everything coming to a head, how would you describe, honestly, now looking back, your relationship with alcohol during your years working as a broker? Would you have described it as no issue at all? Would you have described it as binge drinking or something more than that? Looking back now, what's your sort of honest assessment of your relationship with alcohol?
I think, looking back at it, definitely binge drinking, and you could binge drink with customers. So you might on a big week, like let's say your big week, you probably have 3 or 4 of those a year. You could be binge drinking 3 times during the week, right? And that could be, the really heavy weeks might be 3 lunches that go on till 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. Like IP week in London is just nuts. It's
Wow.
basically sauteed for a week. And you get to the weekend and you're like, get me out of here. But then, this handful of those occasions. The reality is the majority of the time, you're probably out with customers once or twice a week, and that could be a small one or a big one. And again, my wife was not unused to me coming home at 3 o'clock in the morning, because that was my job. I'd come home at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday or whatever it was. Not every week, but once a month, let's say. Cutting to the point, what was my relationship like? For the average person out there in the UK, or the average social drinker, my drinking was probably on the heavy social side, a binge drinker. For the London lifestyle and industry, my drinking was probably light, compared to many, many, many people who are really going for it. And many occasions people might have considered me a lightweight for not being able to keep up with them, etc. So, but I think the key thing is, it wasn't that alcohol was a problem. Nobody was saying to me, Ruari, you have a problem here. Nobody, quite the opposite. Nobody was like, oh, yeah, sure, you're drinking a lot, or you were out last night as well, and you're going out tonight. I was like, I know, a couple of big ones in a row. We've all been there, right? So, and that's the key message, is that really and we'll go into this deeper. The biggest problem with people changing their relationship with alcohol is the fact that at the moment, or previous to 1 year no beer in society, if you wanted to change your relationship with alcohol, you had to admit you had a problem. And as soon as you didn't drink, people immediately assumed that you did have a problem. And that is the problem, right? That is the bit that we are going to crack and destroy, and say, it doesn't matter how much you're drinking. It's irrelevant whether you are drinking 3 glasses of wine a week or more. That if you want to change your relationship with alcohol, you're doing it for positive reasons, to be fitter, faster, healthier, happier. We'll get onto all of that lovely stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there is a common misconception that you have to be an alcoholic, if you like, to have a negative relationship with alcohol, or one that's preventing you from succeeding in your life in a certain way. But Ruari, one thing that I wanted to touch on before we sort of move on with the story, I've heard you before say in another interview that one of the reasons you believe some people drink alcohol, and it is undoubtedly true, but even, not really heavy drinkers, is that, they're sort of masking something or trying to get away from something, or filling a void. And I'm just wondering if, now looking back for you, do you think there was something you were running away from? And if so,
Categorically.
and if so, what was that?
I didn't mean to. I was just so excited there to answer your question.
No worries. Yeah.
But yes, so many factors that I wasn't listening to. So it starts with the noise. Okay, so the noise inside your head. Now, here's my strong belief. The vast majority of people who sign up to 1 Year No Beer are high emotives. So they're people who have a high sense of emotion. So when they're out socially, they're like, oh my God, people are doubting me, question mark. Oh, I need a drink just to feel normal. Or when they're dealing with trauma or past experiences, etc. So the flip side of that is that when you take those people and you remove alcohol from them, you're left with people who've got like emotions, and a lot of emotions, and they're a touch of it. And so many of us, are using alcohol to mask these things. So if I look back at all of the stuff for me, I mean, there's lots of things like I wasn't doing what I felt passionate about. I'd completely forgotten about the letter to Richard Branson. I got paid too much and drank too much and forgot about it. And when I removed alcohol, it reconnected me back into that. And so much so, we'll get onto that about the whole meaning and purpose, and it's coming. But then you look at the environment. I was born on the ocean, right? I spent my entire younger years on a dinghy hauling creels from a young age. And here I was in a landlocked county, miles away from the sea, going by tube into a windowless office, doing a job that I had absolutely meaning and did nothing for the world. So yeah, you're right. And as the thing again, as we understand more from other people, what are the factors that are causing you to drink alcohol or drink a bit too much alcohol? Even just the small things like boredom, because we've literally forgotten how to have joy. Not the like, yeah, but I'm talking about the joy you felt as a kid doing or getting something new and exciting. And we've got to get joy back into our lives about new things that isn't just work, so that we don't feel like we've got to numb ourselves out with drink because we're bored. So lots
of things. Yeah, no, I can there's certainly a lot of sense in what you're saying there, but it took things to come to a head, if you like, for you to sort of really look at your drinking and want to give up, I suppose. And I'll let you explain in your own words, but we had the train incident, and then effectively an ultimatum, if you like, from your wife. But yeah, you can talk us through it in your own words, Ruari.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a couple of parts in here. Is first of all, the train incident was just another incident. Like, I mean, I remember at being 23 and surfing on the roof of a car, traveling at some 30 miles an hour, and it turned right, and I didn't, and I lost all 4 of my front teeth, all the
Oh
skin
my
off my
God.
arm, grazed down in my chest. And we were flying out to the Caribbean for a family holiday the following morning. So I had to get some emergency dental and go over. There's lots of stories of near misses and nearly whoopsies and everything else. But that was just drinking. I mean, okay, a little bit crazy, but that's who I was. I was that little bit over the crazy guy. So I think that the reality is we have all done crazy things we wouldn't normally do, some things that put us into jeopardy, even the small things like driving a car are under the influence, or whatever the things are we've done, crap we've written on Facebook. Long lunch started at midday, 6:00. I'm actually on the way to an NCT class there, my first NCT class, and I'm absolutely hammered. Joy, what a great dad.
What is an NCT class?
National Child Trust. So it's free classes on how to be a dad and how to be a good parent.
Oh my
Great.
goodness. Yeah.
And it's a packed train, and I decided to stick my head out the window and film myself doing, I don't know, whatever is 100 mile an hour out of Paddington with my head out the window. And, that was all just funny at the time. There was no real anything like that. It was all funny. The guys at home were laughing. Obviously I disgraced myself at the NCT class, turning up drunk, and things like that. I mean, that's a shocker, right? Obviously, that's a shocker when you want to be a good dad. Now I pride myself so much on being a good dad. But again, it was just, that's whatever, it is what it is. And about a year before I took the break from alcohol, I came home one night after a boozy session, and I couldn't find my house keys. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And, so I woke up my wife, and she was like, sod this, blah, blah, blah. And the following morning got into the train, and I had a text message saying, I'll be in Sweden with Tilly. Sort yourself out. So I was like, right, I've got to do something about this, and everything else. But the reality was, when I say I've got to do something about this, this is the job, right? That's the job. That's the expectation. This is the job I do. You know what? I'll quit, and actually quit on a couple of occasions into my job. The real change, and the part where this all clicked into place, because for me, my drinking, yes, okay, there were these events, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, wouldn't that make stop drinking? But, well, no, there's lots of people who do crazy stuff all the time, and they don't immediately go and stop drinking. So the bit was, for me, my wife was pretty angry. She had very tumultuous growing up, an abusive mother, who is no longer in the picture. And all of that rage was in our relationship. And that's one of the reasons why we did counseling and all of those kind of things. And I wanted her to see somebody about her anger. And the one thing I've learned in life, certainly in a marriage, is that if you want somebody to change, first start with yourself. So I was like, okay, I want to understand this anger. So I took an anger management course. And on that anger management course, it's a 90-day program. And it said that alcohol and coffee are the two biggest instigators of anger. So I said, okay, great. During this program, I'll not drink for 90 days. And so that is when the journey started beginning. And it was like, as I went through that process, I was just absolutely blown away. I mean, so relieving. I just felt fitter and healthier, and my relationship transformed. The most reason it transformed was because when there is only one person arguing, there isn't an argument. And all of that unreasonableness and everything just disappeared out of me. So I could hear this, blah, and I was like, I love you.
Yeah. So before we get on to sort of the benefits in detail, Ruari, there'll be a lot of people listening who, have probably entertained the idea of giving up alcohol or taking a break for it for some time, understanding the benefits of it. But, I think we shouldn't sugarcoat it. It can be a daunting thing, right? It's ingrained into some people's lives. It's all they've known socially. And so I'm just wondering how daunting it was for you in the beginning, because I know that your boss actually said to you, for example, that you'd be committing commercial suicide by giving up drinking. Now, that's just an example of some of the pressure that was there. And that was only work. And also you had your personal social life. So, just how difficult or daunting was it in the beginning? Or maybe not. Perhaps you'd hit such a point where it just made so much sense. But yeah, if you could talk us through that.
It was, so I think the thing is, it was unbelievably daunting. It was stepping off a precipice of who I was. Okay. So let's just wind back. I had built myself up a reputation to be a top broker. I built a brand around knowing my whiskies. Like, people knew me for that. And really knowing my whiskies. I was the entertainer. I organized the biggest parties in the industry. I was known for getting 250 guys into a nightclub in London one night. Like, that was me. And here I was thinking about not drinking. Like, who, hey? And then I approached my boss, and he said, you are committing commercial suicide if you stop drinking, right? So that is not just I quit. That's I quit would be fine, because I quit my job and I leave. But to stay in your job and become rubbish at it in front of your own eyes, that is just like the worst pain than death.
Yeah.
But I had a choice. I had this choice of staying the same and not changing anything, or choosing my wife and choosing family. And that's what I chose. And so when I plunged into that, saying, you know what, and I had a lot of wrestling, I had coaching about this, and I just said, I'm putting both feet into my wife and family.
Amazing.
Then, thank you. I I jumped off that ledge. But the truth is, there is no ledge. And that's the thing that's so ridiculous, that all of that was nonsense, rubbish. I grew my business by 50%. I had way better fun. I had better relationships. I improved my, right. We'll go through the list of benefits. Everything got better. There was no ledge. I wasn't leaping off a ledge. And yet that was what the feeling was. I had to jump into the total unknown, like, I kill myself and I'm going to be reborn as a new boring person who's going to stay at home, nobody's going to like, and is a crap broker because he doesn't drink. No, none of that was true.
It's funny that all of your beliefs turned out to be wrong. And obviously, yeah, you said you increased your business by 50% and things were better at home, et cetera, et cetera. It seems as though the benefits were endless. And I think there'll be a lot of people listening that find that appealing. And the next thing that I wanted to touch on, you've reeled off some of the benefits, but I wonder if we could put a sort of a time scale on some of those benefits for you, because
when did they happen?
Yeah, exactly. Because there might be people listening who think, right, okay, well, if I go a week, if I go a month, if I go 3 months, a year, what can I expect to experience? And you've been through this yourself, and also, you run a company that puts loads of other people through this. So I assume you have a fairly decent knowledge of sort of, the benefits and when you might hope to feel them. So if you could just talk us through that a bit.
First of all, everyone's journey is different. How much you were drinking, what you were drinking, what your lifestyle is like, so many factors to take into consideration. Of our data, when you look at it, and I'm going to ruin these stats, but 80 or 53% people lose weight, 82% of people reduced anxiety, something like 70 odd percent of people sleep better, a huge percentage, like 90% of people said they were more productive, right? So those are like top line stats, which we work with Stirling University. For me on my journey, I started very clearly, in that first 30 days, starting to feel clarity, starting to feel brain fog lift, and not even realizing that I had brain fog, right? So it's this thing where you think you're going through life at an 8 out of 10, but suddenly you discover that you're actually going through it at a 5 out of 10. And you're like, where am I getting all this extra energy? Where am I suddenly feeling better about myself? Where am I suddenly feeling calmer, more resilient, more able to deal with stressful situations? How come I'm able to concentrate for longer? And all of a sudden I feel like things are coming to me quicker, like I'm sharper, I'm better at my job. And what about the clarity on the things that I want to do? I no longer want to do the crap or be with the people who I don't enjoy, so I'm going to get rid of that, right? So what we sort of say is that most people go through their epiphany, that part where they just go, boom, I feel amazing, 40 to 60 days. Most
Right.
people go through that epiphany 40 to 60 days. Some people 9 days, some people much longer. But that's that part where what you realize is that you have been consuming a depressant. So imagine that we're here, right? And you think this is life here, and you're going ups and downs from this perspective. So you think you're at this 8 out of 10. The reality is you've actually been consuming a depressant, and it's actually had you at 5 out of 10, or even lower, 4 out of 10. And then suddenly you stop taking the depressant, and at some point you bounce back up to the surface. That's what it's like feeling okay about yourself or happy about yourself, feeling comfortable in your own skin. You know what I posted the other day? Give me a reason to my community. Give me a reason why somebody should take a break from alcohol in 2021. And that post has over 500 comments. I went back through it. There are over 200 individual ones, right? And they're like lowered blood pressure, reduced cholesterol, don't wake up in the morning wondering what I put on Facebook, find surprise Amazon packages for accidentally buying stuff, wake up with regret, not knowing what I said to somebody, blah, 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 blah. And they just go on and on and on. And it's like, if only we could help people see all of these benefits in here. In 2015, Professor Kevin Moore did the largest ever study into a 4-week break from alcohol. And he said the study, the findings were so astounding, not just from a health perspective, like reduced liver fat, almost 40% less liver fat, reduced cholesterol, but people sleeping better, feeling better, all of those kind of things. He said that if this were a pill, it would be a multi-billion-dollar success story. Like, this pill is available to all of us. this pill that could probably help you sleep better, feel less anxious, feel less depressed, feel more able to deal with the pandemic, get fitter, lose weight, finally get the job you want, all of those things. And all it's going to take you is 28 days, 90 days to find that out. Wouldn't you want to take it?
Yeah, no, the benefits, you can't argue with the benefits that are there from giving up alcohol. It's been proven in science, and you
Hang on
listed
a second. We just have to wait. Giving up alcohol. You're not giving up anything. You don't give up anything, and you have everything to gain. So this is the thing, is that people think that you're giving up and abstaining, and it's this negative thing of deprivation. And that's what 1 Year No Beer is totally not about. What we have done is we have made not drinking fun. We've made it exciting. We've made it a challenge and adventurous. We've made it about getting stuff, right? This is about going and experiencing a whole new way of life. And that from that, all of these benefits come. So sorry, carry on. But I just
No, it's all right. Well, yeah, because what I was going to say is, and you actually you touched on it there a bit by mentioning fun. And I was going to say, nobody can argue with the benefits, but there will be some people out there, I guess, who would think, I understand that those benefits are there, but for me, it's a part of my life. It's under control, and I enjoy it in that way. And I suppose that's where it comes down to choice. You're explaining quite rightly that these benefits are there for those that want them, and of course there'll be people that would love that, and there'll also be people that will sort of choose to continue on the path that they're on. But it's certainly very appealing the way that you describe it. I mean, who wouldn't want to feel less anxious? Who wouldn't want to have more energy, etc., etc. But one thing I wanted to touch on, Ruari, is so I saw a video of you, and I heard you talk about this in another interview. You're in the bar in Chamonix, I think it is, right? Yeah, with the helmet on, and somebody's hitting you in the head, and it would appear that you're doing shots, but actually you're not doing shots. It's tonic water. And one thing you touched on was sort of almost this idea of pretending that you're drinking in social situations. And I'm just wondering whether that's something that you still do now, or whether that was just sort of in the early stages when you were getting used to not drinking.
Yeah, exactly. Just really in the early stages, and also because it was part of my job and it was kind of expected. So stealth drinking, getting a pint but with alcohol-free beers, gin and tonic without the gin, whatever it is, because you don't really want people to know that you're not drinking, because you'll just get lots of stick. But now, I want people to know that I'm not drinking, because then I get into the conversation with them, and I can always talk about this. I never get bored. My wife might roll her eyes if we're at a wedding, and they're like, look, just leave people alone, because they really want to drink right now,
Yeah.
and you're upsetting their evening by making them question their alcohol. But I'm not the super evangelical, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I still drink. I drink as much as I want, whenever I want, right? I did 2 years alcohol free. And now, I have it in a place of total control. And I think that's where most people want it. They want to get their relationship into a place where they can take it or leave it. Here's the key of that messaging. I never need a drink. Never. I never need it to relax. I never need it to unwind. I never need it in a social situation. I never need it to feel good or have fun. I never need it to, nothing. I never need it. And once you've removed the need, then it's just choice. And you might have a drink or two. I will feel the impacts of it, because I don't drink very often. 2 beers and I'll feel the impact. 1 glass of wine and I just don't sleep. So it might be like, oh, I really fancy a glass of wine with steak tonight. And then both of us go, but do we really want to feel like that tomorrow? Like, I've got 6 podcasts to do. No, I'm joking.
Don't remind me, Ruari. We got off on the wrong foot already. But that's interesting. No, and I guess this is a key thing about 1 Year No Beer, is it's not there to say that, you're never going to drink again, right? It's just, I guess part of it is saying, take a break from it, experience those benefits, know that they're there, and see how you feel. So how regularly do you drink, Ruari? Now, you said it's under control and it's sort of not that often. And how regularly do you, and do you still do sort of long stints off in between?
Every second day, and probably, no, I'm joking.
Yeah.
So last time I had a drink was the day before my 40th, which was the beginning of December. The 40th have always been this really big thing for me in my 30s. Even before I stopped drinking, I was like, it's a big thing. And so I still had to to appease that side of me. So don't get me wrong, I still have a, a black and white part of me. I still have a devil and a good. And I realized from removing alcohol and coaching and all of these things that if I squash that, then it will come screaming out. Right?
Yeah.
I must acknowledge and allow that dark side. I must allow that peace. So when I started on this whole alcohol free and 1 year no beer, there's this expectation on me that I couldn't drink. And like friends were like, oh, but you don't drink and everything. And I was like, hang on a minute. Now you're putting baby in the corner. And if you do that, he'll come out in a really big way. So I can't have that. I don't want that. So I was like, no, it's okay for me to go and have a drink. So and we actually have a program now called Take Control, which helps people, even if they're just thinking about controlling their drinking, to go through a process of controlling your drinking. But also after you've done the challenge, if you're thinking about having a drink, follow a process so that you don't slip down the slippery slope or go back to how you were. So it's a very structured program.
Wow.
And
so you've got
I
things
had
to reduce drinking as well as sort of going fully off it for a while.
Yeah, completely. Because of course, many people choose to go back to drinking, and here they were being in 1 year no beer and disappearing out on their own. No, why aren't we supporting them? So that's where we built the Take Control program. But the key thing was that I had to learn all of that by trial and error myself. And when I say trial and error, one day I was like, right, I want to find out what it is to be pissed again. So I called up some mates and I went to a rugby game, had 5 pints. Following day, I am throwing up in the toilet with my daughter standing beside me, throwing up in the toilet. And I'm like, okay, so that's shit. Really don't like that. But that's just the trial and error part of testing. And I think that sometimes when you are trying to get your relationship of alcohol into control, you have to hit off those barriers and go, no, I definitely don't want to go back down there. So anyway, drank before my 40th. Didn't feel particularly good on my 40th, and but that was my conscious choice. Haven't had a drink since then. Won't for a while. And when I say a while, I don't know. It may be another month or two. It could be tomorrow. I seriously doubt it. And I think that right now under lockdown and things like that, there's absolutely no reason to be drinking alcohol. So there are 2 things in here, and the first thing to remember is that anyone who's even thinking about this right now, the key thing is that a 28 and or 90-day break from alcohol will probably change your life. So with that knowledge, if it's easy for you to do, why not do it just to find it out? And if you get to 90 days and you tell me it didn't change your life, you'll be the first person in over 80,000 people in 90 countries to tell me that, right? So just that is a reason to give it a shot. Second thing is that, right now there's a pandemic going on, right? And so there's fear, uncertainty, craziness. There's all of this stuff going on in the world. So it's perfectly normal that people would rely on the crutch that we have been programmed over decades to believe is our single source of help, right? And that is alcohol. I totally understand. Or maybe binge watching Netflix or scoping out on porn or doing too much work, whatever it is. Those are all the same behaviors. Those are all the addictions. And by the way, our program would help reduce all of those kind of things because it's the same principles. It's understanding what's going on in your brain and trying to change that behavior. The key thing is that, as an example, let's say you're drinking alcohol, and we talked about hope the other day, right? Alcohol is a depressant. It creates anxiety. It creates a feeling of more, you are 8 times more likely to commit suicide on alcohol. And alcohol is prevalent in the majority of child abuse, and the facts and stats are absolutely huge. So, but if you look at the alcohol piece, right, what we need more than anything right now is hope. And drinking a depressant is just like drinking hopelessness. How much hopelessness do you want right now? Because that's what you're doing. And then when you look at the anxiety piece, like, oh, I have a drink for anxiety. Well, alcohol creates anxiety.
It makes you feel a hell of a lot more anxious. Yeah, no, I can certainly.
Totally. So do you want to feel more anxious at the moment, or do you want to feel calmer and more able to deal with what's going on in the world? So
I think now is a great time actually for people to give things like 1 year no beer a go, because you are at home all the time, you're not going out, so the social pressure is not there, and that's one of the biggest barriers for people. For example, sort of in the last 3 months, I've done a 6-week period of no drinking, and now I'm doing dry January as well. Just because, to be honest, I work a 9 to 5 as well as this podcast, and I found that if I was getting a bit drunk at the weekend, then I wasn't able to put the hours in my spare time to make this all happen. So it was just an equation that didn't work out for me. Now, I'm certainly not saying I'm never going to drink again, but I definitely have experienced some of the benefits that you've mentioned yourself, and I do feel a lot more sort of secure in myself and more motivated, especially with this podcast when I'm, going through dry periods. So I certainly can relate directly to what you're saying there, Ruari. And the next thing that I wanted to get onto, it's almost rewinding a tiny bit so that we can go forward again. It's just, I think in many ways for you, 1 year no beer was always meant to be. We talked earlier about getting rejected from the Apprentice, and then Ibiza, and then, oil brokering, and then arriving at 1 year no beer because one of your colleagues who was also a big drinker, Andy, you were going alcohol free, and you found out that he was too. Sort of, you didn't tell each other that you were going to do it. It just came to be, and I just thought this really was meant to be for you when I heard that. But tell us about how 1 year no beer came to be, from discussing with Andy and saying, hey man, this is a game changer. We need to get more people on board with this. We want to sort of break down the social constructs that are there around it. So from having that idea to making it happen, if you could just talk us through that process a little bit.
totally. So Andy and I, well, we met. He inspired me to carry on past the 90 days to do a year. And that's where just so much change started to happen for me. And, we got together and we said, look, there's something really big here. Nobody's talking about the advantages, the benefits of taking a break from booze. If you want to not drink, you have to be stigmatized and labeled and all that kind of stuff. How do we help more people realize it? And we were meeting in a hotel, not like that. We were meeting in a hotel because we were now competing oil brokers, and we shouldn't be catching up with each other because he was the competition. And we would meet on Tuesdays and discuss, because we were both really passionate about positive psychology. He just done a master's in positive psychology. I'd been reading Tony Robbins since I was 12. So we were like, how can we bring, we could do a mindfulness app. We had all these ideas. And then we were like, the one thing that nobody's doing is this alcohol thing. And this is our Trojan horse. Like we can use that as our beachhead, go in with our Trojan horse that is alcohol and behavior change, and then bring out a well-being company. But if we start a well-being company, everyone's going to be like, noise. So that's kind of where the idea, and then we just really sort of fell into everything from there, fell into community, fell into launching it. We gave it all away for free. We argued over that a lot, but I wanted to have a massive impact in the world, and I thought we could do that by giving it away for free. And it cost us a fortune. It was nearly invested 200 grand in the first year, trying to get 1 year no beer to go super viral. And people would say to me, Ruari, you haven't got a business, you've got a very expensive hobby of getting people sober.
That's it. That's a funny way of looking at it, but I've got so much respect for the fact that you wanted to do it for free, Ruari. I think that speaks volumes about who you are as a person. You found something which changed your life in a really positive way, and might have saved your marriage and all the rest of it, and you wanted other people to experience that. And I think that's you've got to respect that. So from obviously you had to take away the free model, if you like, because it wasn't sustainable. Talk to us about how 1 year no beer has grown from the free model it was to now, perhaps how many countries I think you're active in. You said 90, and how many people take part. Yeah, if you could just tell us what the sort of lay of the land is like now.
Totally. We started testing charging for it, and when we did, we saw that people watched more videos and had better outcomes.
Wow.
And the reason is they had skin in the game, and all the science points to that. So it was like, oh, wow, okay, people will pay for this. So the second part was, I said, we cannot make this about the elite or the pro. This has to be for everybody. And so we must charge less than what people are spending on alcohol. So that is still my guiding principle today. And I've been tested many times. Like an investor said to me, Ruari, I'm going to invest this 100 grand. And even if I lost that money, it wouldn't be equivalent to the life change you've given me from your program. And that's
Wow.
somebody who paid £109 for the 90-day challenge. And so many people along the way have been like, Ruari, you need to charge more and you've blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no, this has to be for everybody. This is about a massive impact in the world. That's what that letter was to Richard Branson. This is my guiding piece. So, so to wind forward, in 2017, I was still broking, and really, Andy focused on the content and writing into the product. I ran everything else. And so 2017 was one of the hardest years of my life. I was a senior shareholder in the world's largest oil brokerage. I'd be, running a team of guys on a desk on the phone between BP and Shell doing $20 million cargo deals at the same time with my laptop open, answering people's customer support issues. And I'd be doing that till 3 o'clock in the morning and getting back up at 6.
My
And,
God.
I don't want to repeat that year ever again. It was incredibly tough. But the one thing that did happen is I sent a tweet to a journalist. And off the back of it, we got a 10-minute feature on BBC World News in over 200 countries. And a friend of mine called me up in Italy and he said, Ruari, I've just seen you on the news. I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. I'm meeting the Dalai Lama next week. Would you like to meet him? And so I had a quick flick through my diary. No, I'm kidding.
Make sure you had some time for him.
So literally hopped on a plane and, incredible things happened there. Stuff that made me feel that there was a lot more going on here than just building a company. There's something actually quite spiritual. I'm not religious, but there's something very spiritual about, the awakening, people removing alcohol, all of the imagery around that. But there's something very powerful going on here because stuff happened. Next minute, I was up on stage asking the Dalai Lama a question in front of thousands of people. We weren't supposed to be there. It was actually be streaming live to millions of people, and then we were supposed to go home that day and ended up staying at the hotel and meeting him in the morning. And when I came off the stage, after asking the question, just before I broke down, I actually had a flashback to a recurring nightmare I had as a young child that really struck me. And it was like, wow, I knew what it was. And I was like, this is why I was put on the planet. I know why I'm here. And so I went in on Monday morning and handed in my notice as an oil broker. And so far, that's been the worst financial decision I've ever made. Hopefully that will change. But, I stepped off a cliff. I was earning high 6 figures a year. For the next 2 years of 1 year no beer, I didn't pay myself. And pretty much worked as a volunteer, building up 1 year no beer to where it is today. So winding forward, 1 year no beer has now raised 3.5 million in funding, pretty much all from its members. The members are, as I said, there's a lot of very successful people who've done our challenge. Very, ex-global head of HSBC, 10-year director at Facebook, senior guy at Google, chairman of the biggest angel network in Scotland. Multiple people work at firms like PwC, Accenture. We have helped a lot of very successful people, not just change their relationship with alcohol, but probably go on to change their lives. And that momentum that's behind 1 year no beer is just phenomenal. And then I think that where we're going is, we've discovered a unique source, and the unique source is what happens when you empower individuals who are going through a journey of changing their own behavior to help others change their behavior. And so somebody who's on day 20, who's given the tools and the education and the content to be able to support somebody who's on day 1, that's incredibly powerful because it solidifies their own behavior change. And this is what we are now doing. So we've invested in our app. Our app is launching in a couple of weeks' time, internally, first of all, to our customers, but there'll be lots of iterations. And then how we build community inside our app and how we go. So the focus now is for alcohol, but really that with our behavior change model, we're going to diversify into things like, caffeine, sugar, social media, work, whatever it is. All you could call it addictions, but we call it habit change.
Wow. So you can see this applying to, I don't know if we can say, but more serious drugs, if you like heroin, cocaine. You see this model applying to all addictions. And that's another question that I had for you actually, Ruari, is one year no beer as suitable for a binge drinker as it is a serious alcoholic? That's an interesting thing that I wanted to ask you.
Yes. So um, uh, the well, first of all, we are aimed at the binge drinker and heavy drinkers. Okay. We have helped a lot of people who have been to AA previously or are very serious drinkers. We've helped a lot of people, but it does state clearly in our terms that we are not for heavily dependent drinkers, that they probably need more support. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
here's the part. As I was talking to a group of doctors today, one of the problems with that model is that in the past the choices were, I'm okay, and okay could still be drinking 10 pints a day, but you're still going to work and performing. Or it could be 3 bottles of wine of red at night, but you're still going into work and performing. Like that could still be okay. And then you're over here, which is you've gone off the deep end, you're pouring whiskey on your cornflakes, you are going to be like this forever, and you're going to be labeled and stigmatized. And that's what the two options were. And we're actually stretching that out either side. Like we're right up here to where I'm actually, I could kind of take it or leave it, but could I do 90 days? Oh, I'm not sure. Right. I'm for that person. And then I'm all the way down to actually some people who are drinking daily and heavily amounts. Of course, we recommend that they go and see their GP and have localized support for people. But the thing that is amazing is that when you put somebody who would traditionally be labeled and put into the corner of that dark hole where it's quite a depressing place, but instead put them with people who are trying to do this just for a challenge, guess what? They're changing their relationship with alcohol like never before. Like this is so life affirming. It's so positive. I've never seen anything like this where I feel so supportive. And if they can do it and they can do it, then maybe I can do it too. So, so it's kind of disrupting the whole model. And again, we have to be careful with that word addictions, because people don't really associate their behavior as addictions. They are, like, I know the science behind it. Like, most of us are addicted to work, and most of us are addicted to social media, and most of us are addicted to something, right? What is addiction? Addiction is a response to trauma, and addiction is also a compulsive behavior which you struggle to stop. Like we have lots of them, biting nails, whatever those things are. But when you use that word, people in society go, oh, right, you're one of them. So you're the over on the other side. And that's where we've got to say, no, this is just about habit change. This is about lifestyle choices, habit change, and everything else. Of course, what we're really dealing with is addiction.
yeah. That's fantastic. I love the way that you look at it in a different way and try and sort of reframe it, and ultimately with the goal of making it more effective and changing people's lives in a positive way. Ruari, let's say tomorrow I decided I wanted to subscribe or purchase a membership to One Beer for a 90-day challenge. What can I expect from the platform? What do users get from it concretely?
Yes. So the key thing is we're going to hold your hand on a daily basis, which means daily emails, videos, and a lot of content, which is going to help you think about alcohol completely different. There's also lots of things to do in there, right? So for an example, day 2 is book into a challenge. And most likely we want people to do a physical challenge. Why? Because, well, exercise is like the antidote to drinking. Also, the lymphatic system, which is your liver, does not have a pump, and you need movement early in the morning to start really detoxing. So exercise is really a key part of what we're doing, but also sleep starts with exercising in the morning. So there are lots of things that we've structured to get you to do. And whether it's, gratitude or journaling, or maybe for some people doing some cold showers. Yes, you can change your relationship with alcohol by having cold showers, because
Wow.
you teach your brain an alternative way to release dopamine very fast. And that's a brilliant thing to do. So there's lots of things like that in the challenge. It keeps it exciting, keeps it fresh. And then the biggest thing is the community. And you will see that, like, how inspiring it is to see people further ahead and share their story, and the vulnerability and the realness of people talking about whether alcohol was a big impact or wasn't a big impact, but how much impact not drinking has had on their lives. So I guess that's the thing. And then you said, if I was, so I'm just going to put that back. Sam, you run a podcast, and therefore you're a person of influence. And I believe in something really important, and I believe that's leading by example. So I believe that you can't ask anybody to do something you haven't done yourself. So are you going to do the 90-day challenge, Sam?
You put me right on the spot here, Rory. Well, I
Yes.
am. What are we today? Is it the 20? Is it the 26th today?
Yes,
It's
it
the
is.
20. Yeah, it's the 26th. So I'm 26 days in, and
Brilliant.
I did 6 weeks about 2 months ago. It certainly is something that appeals to me. And
Good.
yes, I will do it at some point
Done.
during this year. I will do it for sure. No, it's
Oh, at some point during this year. What do you mean? You've already got momentum behind you. You're ready to go. What's wrong with carrying on?
I don't know. I think it is scary sort of saying I'm going to do it now. I'm going to continue now. But no, look, I've done these 2 stints recently and I've really seen the benefits from it. So I absolutely will take part in it because, as I said before, I kind of need to at the moment because I need every second of my spare time to be
Totally.
productive because I have a 9 to 5. So you put me right on the spot there, Rory.
This is the one thing that's going to give you the clarity this year. It's going to help you be more productive. You're going to be better. I mean, you're already very good at podcasting. Like, you're one of the better interviewers I've had. You've really done your research into the questioning, and I massively appreciate you for that. And I'm sure your listeners will too. Like, it
Thanks,
makes for an
Rory.
amazing podcast. So, there's going to be so much more opportunity that you will be around to see. And look, I'm never going to pressure anyone to do it. I'm never going to force anyone to do it. Nothing like that. But this is the one thing that will really, we call it the Keystone Habit, right? Like the keystone in the bridge. This one thing opens up everything else. And you just see it time and time and time again. So the other key thing is, for anyone who's currently doing dry January, here's the reason why you should carry on. So momentum is with you, right? January is one of the easiest years for you not to drink because it's so socially normed now that people don't drink in January. So you're given that excuse, right? You're given that permission to not drink. And actually, that you've built up this momentum that is the hard yards. These first few weeks are often really hard, that getting that momentum back might be much more difficult later in the year. Second thing is, there is never a good time. There are always events, there are always excuses, there are always things on the shoulder, there's always stuff. But this is why you should do it. And the reason is that the more of those events you go through, the more you will be changing your relationship with alcohol. So if you've got a wedding, that's when you should not drink, because by going to the wedding and not drinking, you prove to your brain that you actually had a really good time without alcohol. If you avoid all those events, then you're not really changing your relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, Ruari. I think you're an incredibly inspirational guest. You left the really high paid job as an oil broker, something that I think a lot of people would never be able to do. The draw of the money and all the rest of it. And you tried to create a free platform that could help others change their lives. And of course, that that wasn't viable in the long term. But even still, you want to keep it affordable and you want to make a difference in this world. And I think that's incredible, Ruari. The way I like to finish off the podcast is by asking guests if they have a few bits of advice that they can give to listeners to help them get through the hard times. And the thing I love about your story, Ruari, is it's not just about 1 year no beer and not drinking. You very bravely spoke about things like a suicide attempt, and living with ADHD and dealing with failure, so many things, as well as not drinking. So yeah, I just wondered if as a way of finishing off, there was anything that you'd like to share with listeners. It can be as general as you like, but that might help them get through the hard times or make sense of the hard times.
100%. That is that we can't do anything about what's going on out there in the world. We can't do anything about all of that stuff. Those things are out with our control. The only thing we can do is choose how it affects us. And of course, the one thing that is screwing that up for everybody is adding a depressant that increases anxiety and fear and loneliness and suicidal thoughts and depression. And that's what alcohol does. So, by choosing, and I guess the one other part to add into there is that it's very easy to get sucked into all the noise that's going on out there in the world. And yes, I'm calling it noise. It's noise in the media. We're reading deaths. There's feelings of emotion, loneliness, and grief, and all of those things are out there. And the one thing you can do to bring that in is gratitude, right? Gratitude for the small things in yourself. You can't feel anger and gratitude at the same time. Those are two contradicting emotions. So that would be my one thing, is gratitude.
No, okay, I love that, Ruari. Thank you so much for coming on. You've explained so many useful things in this podcast, and there definitely is so much to be gained from going alcohol free for a period. And I'm certainly sold, and I'd encourage others to do it. And you'll have to check back in with me, Ruari, to see how I'm doing. But
yes, please.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for having me on. And good luck in your challenge. Well done.
That's it for today's episode, guys. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you hit subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and also that way it makes sure that you never miss an episode. If you've got a story that you want to share on the Back on Track podcast, get in touch, give me a shout. I'd love to hear from you via info@backontrackpodcast.com.